We're ready, huh? Huh? Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Friday. Simple Melodies. Today we have a special theme. In view of all the troubles we're having in our community and in our nation, we decided we needed some uplifting songs, inspirational uplifting songs of faith and hope and brotherhood. We're going to start with a 1952 song commissioned by Jane Froman. She kind of discouraged during the Korean War and wanted something that was uplifting, and they came up with the song, I Believe. I believe for every drop of rain that falls, a flower grows. I believe that somewhere in the darkest night a candle glows. I believe for everyone who goes astray, someone will come to show the way. I believe, I believe above the storm, the smallest prayer will still be heard. I believe that someone in the great somewhere gives every word. Every time I hear a newborn baby cry, or touch a leaf, or see the sky, then I know why I believe. Our next song was a big hit for Perry Como in 1952. It's based on an old Confucian statement about light, better to light one little candle than stay in the dark. Better to light just one little candle than to stumble in the dark. Better far that you light just one little candle. All you need is a tiny spark. If all we say a prayer that the world would be free. Wonderful dawn of a new day we'll see. And if everyone lit just one little candle, what a bright world this would be. Our next number was a big hit for the Lettermans in 1968. It's based on a famous poem by James Donne in 1624, John Donne rather. This No Man is an Island. It's been done a number of different times, but here's the version that we have. Give me a couple lines of introduction. No man is an island. No Ishmael as my brother, Ishmael as my friend. I saw the people gather, I heard the music swell, a song that they were singing is ringing in my heart. No man is an island, no man stands alone. Each man joy to me, each man grief is my own. We need one another, so I will defend each man as my brother, each man as my friend. Here's a great gospel standard written in 1951. Somebody bigger than you. Who made the mountains? Who made the tree? Who made the river flow to the sea? Who hung the moon in the starry sky? Someone bigger than you and I. Who made the flowers bloom in the spring? Who wrote the music for robin to sing? And who sends the rain when the earth is dry? Someone bigger than you and I. He lights the way when the road is long, keeps you company with love to guide you. He walks beside you just like he walks with me. When I am weary, filled with despair, who gives me courage to go on from there, and who gives me faith that I will never die? Somebody bigger than you and I. From Carousel, 1954, Rodgers and Hammerstein, You'll Never Walk Alone. When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high, and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, for your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone. Another Rodgers and Hammerstein number, quite the same kind of vein. 1954, the sound of music. Climb every mountain. Climb every mountain, search high and low, follow every byway, every path you know. Climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow till you find your dream. A dream that will need all the love you can give every day of your life, for as long as you live. Climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow till you find your dream. That's a hard one to get. All right, this is a number by Johnny Marks, 1966. It was a big hit for Lawrence Welk. He liked to play it all the time. Anyone can move a mountain. You'll find it here though. Anyone can move a mountain if he really tries. Anyone can move a mountain, you must realize. It will take a little time, a lot of faith, make up your mind, and you'll arrive at where you strive to be. So never be afraid to dream, that's what you must do. If you never dream at all, then your dreams can't come true. Anyone can move a mountain, everyone should know. Just believe and you will find it so. Anyone can move a mountain, okay? For the beauty of the earth. For the beauty of the earth, for the glory of the sky, for the love which from our birth over and all around us lie. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human love, brother, sister, parent, child, friends on earth and friends of all, for all gentle thoughts and mild. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. This is a song, a hymn that goes back to 1857. It's called Little Brown Church in the Vale. And there actually was a little brown church in the Vale that was built 4 years before the gentleman wrote it, William Pitt. There's a church in the valley by the wildwood, no lovely spot in the dale. No place is so dear as to childhood as the little brown church in the vale. Come, 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 come to the church in the wildwood. Oh, come to the church in the dale. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale. How sweet on a clear Sabbath morning to listen to the clearing bell. Its tones so sweetly are calling, oh, come to the church in the vale. Oh, come, 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 come to the church in the wildwood. Oh, come to the church in the dale. No spot is so clear to my childhood as the little brown church in the vale. Oh, now we go to Charlie Chaplin. Okay. Here's a lovely song written by Charlie Chaplin for his movie Modern Times in 1936. The lyrics were added to this to 1954. Smile, though your heart is aching, smile, even though it's breaking when there are clouds in the sky. You get by if you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness, although a tear may be ever so near. That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you'll just smile. Our next song is from The Wizard of Oz, written by Harold Arlen and sung by Judy Garland, Over the Rainbow. Once in a lullaby, somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Fly over the rainbow, why then, oh why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly on the rainbow, next song is an old hymn, goes back to 1865. Day by day, and with each passing moment, strength I'll find to meet my trials here, trusting in my Father's wide bestowment. I can cause to worry or for fear. He whose heart is kind beyond measure, give to me each day what eating best, lovingly impart of pain and pleasure, mingling toil with peace and rest. From the 1965 musical Man of La Mancha, The Impossible Dream. The impossible dream to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go, to right the unrightable wrong, to love fear and chase from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest. And the world will be better for this, that one man, scorned and covered with scars, still strove with his lifestyles of courage to reach the unreachable stars. Count your blessing. All right. Count your blessing. Here's another old hymn from 1897 by Johnson Oatman. Count your blessing. When upon like billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy? You are called to will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Our last song. Our last song is You Raise Me Up. When I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up to think and stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. There is no life without its hunger. Each restless heart beats so imperfect beat. But when you come and I am filled with wonder, sometimes I think I glimpse eternity. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. So I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. Thank you, Gretchen. I hope you're a little bit uplifted. We hope so. Have a good day. Thank you.
Are you ready to go now? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Billy Stevens. I live on the 4th floor in the North Wing here at Woodland Pond. And I'm here to share a reading for the Interfaith Hour today, or quarter of an hour, not an hour. This is not the reading that I had prepared for today. In fact, I started on 2 and had decided on the second one. And as I was looking through some of my papers today, I found a third one. And somehow it just seemed like this was the one that should be read today. This is actually from Eugene Peterson's version, modern day version of the Bible in contemporary language. And it's about the book of Job. It's about suffering. There's been a lot of suffering going on in Woodland Pond and in the area and in my life this week. In addition to the Woodland Pond losses, we lost a very dear niece on the 4th of July. We've had bad news about a good friend who has discovered a heart condition that can be very serious. So suffering just seemed to be the right topic. In Eugene Peterson's version of the message, he gives an introduction to each book of the Bible, and this is his introduction to the book of Job. Job suffered. His name is synonymous with suffering. He asked, why? He asked, why me? And he put his questions to God. He asked the questions persistently, passionately, and eloquently. He refused to take silence for an answer. He refused to take cliches for an answer. He refused to let God off the hook. Job did not take his sufferings quietly or piously. He disdained going for a second opinion to outside physicians or philosophers. Job took his stance before God, and there he protested his suffering, protested mightily. It is not only because Job suffered that he is important to us, it is because he suffered in the same ways that we suffer, in the vital areas of our family, our personal health, and material things. Job is also important to us because he searchingly questioned and boldly protested his suffering. Indeed, he went to the top with his questions. It is not suffering as much that troubles us. It is undeserved suffering. Almost all of us in our years of growing up have the experience of disobeying our parents and getting punished for it. When that discipline was connected with wrongdoing, it had a certain sense of justice to it. When we do wrong, we get punished. One of the surprises as we get older, however, is that we come to see that there is no real correlation between the amount of wrong we commit and the amount of pain we experience. An even larger surprise is that very often there is something quite the opposite. We do right and we get knocked down. We do the best we are capable of doing, and just as we are reaching out to receive our reward, we are hit from the blind side and sent reeling. This is the suffering that first bewilders and then outrages us. This is the kind of suffering that bewildered and outraged Job. For Job was doing everything right when suddenly everything went wrong. And it is this kind of suffering to which Job gives voice when he protests to God. Job gives voice to his suffering so well, so accurately, and honestly that anyone who has ever suffered, which includes every last one of us, can recognize his or her personal pain in the voice of Job. Job says boldly what some of us are too timid to say. He makes poetry out of what in many of us is only a tangle of confused whimpers. He shouts out to God what a lot of us mutter behind our sleeves. He refuses to accept the role of a defeated victim. It is also important to note that Job does not, what he does not do, lest we expect something from him that he does not intend. Job does not curse God, as his wife suggests he do, getting rid of the problem by getting rid of God. But neither does Job explain suffering. He does not instruct us in how to live so that we can avoid suffering. Suffering is a mystery, and Job comes to respect the mystery. In the course of facing, questioning, and respecting suffering, Job finds himself in an even larger mystery, the mystery of God. Perhaps the greatest mystery in suffering is how it can bring a person into the presence of God in a state of worship, full of wonder, love, and praise. Suffering does not inevitably do that, but it does it far more often than we would expect. It certainly did that for Job. Even in his answer to his wife, he speaks the language of an uncharted irony, a dark and difficult kind of truth. We take the good days from God. Why not also the bad days? But there is more to the book of Job than Job. There are Job's friends. The moment we find ourselves in trouble of any kind, sick in the hospital, bereaved by a friend's death, dismissed from a job or relationship, depressed or bewildered, people start showing up telling us exactly what is wrong with us and what we must do to get better. Sufferers attract fixers the way roadkill attracts vultures. At first, we are impressed that they bother with us and amazed at their facility with answers. We know so much. They know so much. How did they get to be such experts in living? More often than not, these people use the Word of God frequently and loosely. They are full of spiritual diagnosis and prescription. It all sounds so hopeful, but then we begin to wonder, why is it that for all their apparent compassion, we feel worse instead of better after they've said their piece? The book of Job is not only a witness to the dignity of suffering and God's presence in our suffering, but is also our primary biblical protest against religion that has been reduced to explanations or answers. Many of the answers that Job's so-called friends give him are technically true, but is the technical part that ruins them. They are answers without personal relationship, intellect without intimacy. The answers are slapped into Job's ravaged life like labels on a specimen bottle. Job rages against this secularized wisdom that has lost touch with the living realities of God. In every generation, there are men and women who pretend to be able to instruct us in a way of life that guarantees that we will be healthy, wealthy, and wise. According to the propaganda of these people, anyone who lives intelligently and morally is exempt from suffering. From their point of view, it is lucky for us that we are now at hand to provide the intelligent and moral answers that we need. On behalf of all of us who have been misled by the platitudes of the nice people who show up to tell us that everything is going to be just all right, if we simply think such and such or do such and such, Job issues an anguished rejoinder. He rejects the kind of advice and teaching that has God all figured out, that provides glib explanations for every circumstance. Job's honest defiance continues to be the best defense against the cliches of positive thinkers and the prattle of religious small talk. The honest, innocent Job is placed in a setting of immense suffering and then surrounded by the conventional religious wisdom of the day in the form of speeches by his friends. The contrast is unforgettable. The counselors methodically and pedantically recite their bookish precepts to Job. At first, Job rages in pain and roars out at his protests. But then he becomes silent in awestruck faith before God, who speaks out of a storm, a whirlwind of deity. Real faith cannot be reduced to spiritual bromides and merchandised in success stories. It is refined in the fire and the storms of pain. The book of Job does not reject answers as such. There is content to biblical religion. It is the secularization of answers that is rejected, answers severed from their source, the living God, the word that both batters us and heals us. We cannot have truth about God divorced from the mind and heart of God. In our compassion, we don't like to see people suffer. And so our instincts are aimed at preventing and alleviating suffering. No doubt that is a good impulse, but if we really want to reach out to others who are suffering, we should be careful not to be like Job's friends, not to do our helping with the presumption that we can fix things, get rid of them, or make them better. We may look at our suffering friends and imagine how they could have better marriages, better behaved children, better mental and emotional health. But when we rush in to fix suffering, we need to keep in mind several things. First, no matter how insightful we may be, we don't really understand the full nature of our friends' problems. Second, our friends may not want our advice. Third, the iconic fact of the matter is that more often than not, people do not suffer less when they are committed to following God, but more. When these people go through suffering, their lives are often transformed, deepened, marked with beauty and holiness in remarkable ways that could never have been anticipated before the suffering. So instead of continuing to focus on preventing suffering, which we simply won't be very successful at anyway, perhaps we should begin entering the suffering, participating insofar as we are able, entering the mystery and looking around for God. In other words, we need to quit feeling sorry for people who suffer and instead look up to them, learn from them, and if they will let us, join them in protest and prayer. Pity can be nearsighted and condescending. Shared suffering can be dignifying and life-changing. As we look at Job's suffering and praying and worshiping, we see that he has already blazed a trail of courage and integrity for us to follow. But sometimes it's hard to know just how to follow Job's lead when we feel so alone in our suffering, unsure of what God wants us to do. What we must realize during those times of darkness is that the God who appeared to Job in the whirlwind is calling out to all of us. Although God may not appear to us in a vision, he makes himself known to us in all the many ways that he describes to Job, from the macro to the micro, from the wonders of the galaxies to the little things we take for granted. He is the creator of the unfathomable universe all around us, and he is also the creator of the universe inside of us. And so we gain hope, not from the darkness of our suffering, not from pat answers in books, but from the God who sees our suffering and shares our pain. Reading Job prayerfully and meditatively leads us to face the questions that arise when our lives don't turn out the way we expect them to. First, we hear all the stock answers. Then we ask the questions again with variations and hear the answers again with variations, over and over. Every time we let Job give voice to our questions, our suffering gains in dignity, and we are brought a step closer to the voice and mystery of God. Every time we persist with Job in rejecting the quick fix counsel of people who see us and hear us, but do not understand us, we deepen our availability and openness to the revelation that comes only out of the tempest. The mystery of God eclipses the darkness and the struggle. We realize that suffering calls our lives into question, not God's. The tables are turned. God alive is present to us. God is speaking to us. And so Job's experience is confirmed and repeated once again in our suffering and our vulnerable humanity. I invite you to look again at the book of Job. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you, Billy. And and to you and Bill, and to others in our Woodland Pond family who have suffered some loss in their own families. We send our condolences to you too. We thank everybody who's participated today. We thank Bert for helping us remember that life goes on, you know, to think of fun things like sports. And that was good to hear the trivia as a sense of normalcy that has become our normal on Fridays, for him to do that. And we thank Paul Bateman for his wonderful baritone voice. He just sings so beautifully, and to share those songs with you today. And Billy, thank you. So that ends our programming for today, for this week. And we wish you all a peaceful, blessed weekend, and talk to you on Monday. Thanks.